Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to AWS Security Live. My name's Rob Hale. I lead AWS's security partner business across EMEA. I help join all the dots of all of our partners and our native solutions to solve for security challenges for our customers. You may know AWS Security Live. We are a bi-weekly show. We have amazing partner guests to talk about all things security. And as ever, I'm joined by my awesome co-host, Himanshu.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. This is a little bit of a shift. I'm helping Rob out this week. We're actually live also at Partner Equip in Americas. My name is Himanshu. I lead the team of our AWS Security, Identity, and Governance Specialists. We are a worldwide team that helps customers and partners with their security outcomes. Really excited to be here on this Security Live session. As I said, a little plug for Partner Equip, which is going on live in Americas. Very soon we'll be at Reinforce, which is where would love to see all of our partners as well as customers. And there will be later this year a Partner Equip in London as well for our EMEA partners. But thanks for that introduction, Rob. Yeah. It's been a busy few weeks. We're coming off of RSA, which was pretty exciting and very busy with customer meetings as well as partner meetings. A lot of exciting stuff in the security world, and I think I had predicted a few things which sort of came true. I think one of those things was how the messaging will turn from Gen AI security to all things agentic, which I think really, I think that's what was happening this year.
That's we've got, as you may know, if you're involved in as an AWS customer, we have in Europe at the moment the AWS summits moving for Europe. We're running roundtables, a number of those for customer CISOs. Agentic AI has been right at the top of that. And actually, we've got an awesome guest actually to talk about around AI. So let's welcome Gregor Stewart from SentinelOne.
Hey, Rob, Himanshu. How are you doing?
Hey, good, thanks. How are you?
I'm coming in from Mountain View today. I'm in the lovely box right here so I can control the lighting and the sound. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I lead AI in detection research and engineering at SentinelOne. That's everything from strategy, platform building, and product development. Right. So.
Wow, and that's quite a small role then. So I imagine you're you haven't got much to do in that area.
No, it's pretty slow, as you know.
So you're from Mountain View. I'm in Hampshire in the UK. Himanshu's in Seattle. If you're listening, by the way, send us a comment. Make a comment. We read them. We'll read them out. If you've got questions for myself, Himanshu, or Gregor, then just put them in the chat and we'll read them out. But we'd love to know where you're connecting in from. We have customers all over the world, so please hit us with your questions.
And welcome to the show, Gregor. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and SentinelOne.
Yeah, so as you know, SentinelOne's a kind of provider primarily of endpoint and EDR and sort of security data solutions, all wrapped up together in this agentic platform, which we'll probably get to in a bit. And I came to SentinelOne about a couple of years ago after spending 5 years or so at Medallia running AI research and engineering. And what drew me here was three things, right? So the chance to work again with great engineering leaders, right? It's important to preserve things that work. That's the route to maturity, right? The second one, though, was an opportunity to serve a new community, right? That's really in need of better technology. I think what I saw, especially when I was talking to my colleagues who moved here, was that SecOps in particular is this life of quiet desperation. It's like a million alerts. You're never quite sure what one to focus on, and so this technology I think can address that, and so it has a whole set of problems that will really push the technology that I'm closest to, which I have a long history in NLP and language modeling, and of course that's become almost everything in AI now.
That's one thing that whenever I speak to customers and particularly security operations teams, they never tell me, I just don't have enough data. So, they might not have the right data, but data is usually not the problem.
Like we were joking, it's like, oh, it's a sleepy world. I hardly have to do anything. None of that's ever true, right? They're always like, oh my God, my hair's on fire all the time, right? So this is who we serve, right? Yeah.
I do like this progression, Gregor, from machine learning, AI research to, like combining natural language processing with the security world or the security operations world. I think there's a lot of talk these days around how to reduce the cognitive load on security teams.
Yes.
And I would love to hear your point of view on, what you believe or foresee where and how artificial intelligence, as well as, to your point, using natural language processing or some of those generative artificial intelligence use cases can help security outcomes.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I'm so very glad to do is be a partner of AWS, and so I get to see, right, the stuff that you've got, the stuff that's coming, right, and one of your more recent, announcements, and again, we'll see more, I think, reinforce, we're reaching the limit on dashboard-based, interfaces, right? So I think you guys have just about the best in the business. It's super dense. I can see everything, attack paths. I can click through all the information. And the tricky thing about that is now, of course, people don't know what to look at. Right, I can look at anything, and so one of the things that we're trying to use the technology for is what people should focus on, right? So I think if I were kind of summarizing our whole, approach here, it's like precise, autonomy, anywhere, right? And so precision, which is, in the security business, you've gotten away for a long time finding problems. Right? Like this is the number one thing you get rewarded for, right? VCs, whoever's like, I found a new problem, a whole new thing that's broken, right? Add to the pile. And very little about, should I work on these things I found? And which ones should I work on, right? So we're going to take, although the technology can find deeper, more difficult problems, more subtle problems, I think we're going to focus more on the precision, right? Which ones should I work on? Which ones should I tackle to improve security, right?
Actually, that's a top question from when I talk to our customers, is that, look, customers are looking for ways and use cases where they can use things like machine learning and AI and maybe generative AI. But the biggest question is, well, look, where do I start? What can I actually, should I start with the big picture, trying to make sense of all this data, or should I start with something that's actually deliverable and, has a very deliberate impact, but is maybe a smaller scale?
Yeah. Take something as simple as these, piles of alerts, right? And in a short window, you get a set of alerts, right? And then you're asking, are any of these connected, right? And one parallel, that you could hold in your mind, right, is that if you're familiar with messing around with LLMs and chat and whatnot, you could say you can give LLMs very garbled versions of stories and say, what story is this? And it'll be, oh, that's Pride and Prejudice or whatever, right? So they're really good at taking, like traces essentially, right? And giving you, oh, I think that's this story. Now, translate that back into the security realm, a kind of garbled picture. There's this event, there's this thing, etc. Is this a story with a bad ending, right? So even from a precision standpoint, we're able to take arrays of alerts and make a little more sense of them. They have some narrative to them, and extracting that narrative is one way in which these technologies can improve, right, your ability to work.
And you mentioned a point, I think, which was interesting, which is, it started off by visualization, which is like, this quote unquote, I think the technology underneath was the graph database of connecting these dots and then plotting them and pointing it out. Now I think for a security team, very easy to go in and just ask in human readable format, like, what is the top threat or what is the top risk that I need to go and address, and then give me all the details and recommendations. Mm-hmm. Tell us more about where and how sort of like the machine learning part still plays a big role in this, because I think what I'm seeing is that a lot of the noise around Gen AI takes away from what goes on underneath, which is the science of actually compiling and bringing in all that data. like Rob mentioned, like, there's tons and tons of data. So at the end of the day, it's still like, applying machine learning algorithms on that data.
So as you get more source of information, right, and you're able to connect, make more connections, whether it's graphs or, like essentially other logs, right? It becomes harder to know how to traverse that information, right, to find problems or to figure out how to solve problems, right? And one of the issues there is that you don't really know the structure of that information, and you don't really know how to query it, because it's often in very different systems. One of the anywhere part of our approach here is that what agentic stuff will deliver, right, is this ability to range across platforms a little more easily. And you can see this thing with Purple that we started building a couple of years ago, right, and we delivered to market, which is you don't need to know anything about how Power Query works, right, or a bunch of third-party sources work. We take your security intent and we kind of map it to these different sources, right? Now, how are we able to do that? One way is that we're able to kind of normalize things, right? So a lot of machine learning can be involved in normalizing data, right? Especially if you're pulling it in. Another one, though, is enriching it, right? So that I only need to query very small parts of the data, instead of, imagine you've got legacy stores, right? They don't always go so quickly. So one innovation that we have been able to make use of more recently is embeddings, right? So you take, very high dimensional data, and you turn it into a very low dimensional representation, and then you use that as an index or way of searching, right? So that, say, an agentic system doesn't have to churn through a full scale query. It can very quickly move around, right, and find the pieces it needs, grab the information and get on with the task. And that's actually a story that's told at many different levels, right? The idea is you use the techniques that we now consider to be what you might call legacy techniques in machine learning, right? Or traditional machine learning, right, before generative arrived, to do enrichment and embed things and so on, to make the space for the generative AI, the agentic AI, smaller, right? So it can actually operate more effectively. Because, as you know, it's still quite expensive, right, to run these things, especially reasoning, where you're blowing millions of tokens, right, figuring stuff out. So the best you can do is a lot of traditional ML underneath, right, to up level the task for the generative AI, for the agentic AI, and then you can move around more quickly. And it has the side benefit of making things that weren't possible with legacy stores and so on, a bit easier.
Yeah, we see a lot of noise around agentic AI, a lot of customer questions around it. So how are you seeing customers actually use it in that environment? And then what are the risks and threats that the security teams need to be aware of as their businesses start to use those services?
Right. So I think we kind of covered a couple of things there. One of them was that we're focusing on finding the right problems to work on, right, the right pieces of work, and then we're trying to do as much of that work as we can, right, so that humans can focus on other things, right. But one thing you can't automate is accountability, right. So there are kind of two main things here. Can we build AI systems that can do this work? Can you construct a detection to given an advisory, right? Can you investigate an incident, right, in a way which is driven by policy and comes to a conclusion that can be used, right? Yes, I think we can do those things, right? But how do you maintain accountability when you've got thousands and thousands of these things being worked on at any given time, right? So we've adopted a pattern we call lean in, right, in which you would say the system does something under the hood and it initially is showing you that in recommendation form, and then you're saying, yeah, you got that right. This bit's wrong, and so on. So over time, the customer gets a sense of trust, right? Just like you would in a person. You give them a simple task, they do okay. You give them more tasks, more complex tasks, right? And you build trust in that system. You can see it. You've got an operational record of when it was right and wrong, right? And you can see it's improving. And at that point, the customer may lean in and say, yeah, in circumstances like this, you just do it, right? You do it system, right? So those are key things. You can't automate accountability. So you have to build systems that leave the person in control, leave the people in control, even though a lot of this work is getting done. And that's actually the biggest challenge in this agentic era. It's not, can we build things to do detection engineering? That is hard, but it's tractable. It's more, can we build experiences that leave people in control, right? Because autonomy is got to be limited. Car isn't deciding where to go. You're deciding where to go, right?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the main things that particularly in operations, it's around augmenting the human. The human is still in control, but it's allowing them to scale. It's allowing them to do simple operations that they can then be in control of, and then they can orchestrate. And it's almost like we're using supervised learning. I mean, that's the function here in terms of helping the model learn. But actually, you're also building trust, your own trust in the tools, and making sure they're doing what you want them to do. I think that's super important to realize.
That's right.
Yeah, and for our audience and listeners, please feel free to drop in a question if you have for Gregor or for your host as well. Gregor, I think you mentioned I think a couple of things earlier. I just want to peel a little bit into those. I think you mentioned normalization. This stems from the fact that there's so much logs and data that goes into security analysis, and then we've actually invested quite a bit in that as well. From an industry standpoint, and rallying behind the industry with regards to an open search standard called the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, or OCSF, that's potentially helps with that normalized schema set. Yes. Open for everyone to leverage and use. And I know SentinelOne's been leveraging that. And then, and you mentioned transformation, which is a big part of that, which is hey, there's logs coming in all these different formats. How do you transform them easily? Are you leveraging some of those turnkey solutions from AWS that are helping partners essentially take away that undifferentiated heavy lifting of doing some of this normalization transformation to accelerate your journey towards these new security outcomes?
Yes. So as you know, we're all in on OCSF, even though you all changed the standard in a breaking way, and then we had to we had to fix that up. So, however, these normalization standards, right, really only they're containers, right? So although they provide a common semantics, they only do so to a certain level, right? So there's still there's still a kind of level within the containers of each column, right? For interpretation, right? And so one of the things that we're leveraging is smaller models, right, to kind of do on the fly fix up, right? Much like this notion of what we're calling enrichment, right? So you're saying, well, if I can't rely on order or the contents here, I can at least on the fly kind of pick up the things that I do see, right? So there's a certain limit to what standardized schemas enable, and then below that you can soak up some of the residual, if you like, variation, right? Using enrichment techniques which can leverage these smaller kind of runtime capable LLMs, right? I guess small language models, really, right? You AWS in particular, right, has a huge toolkit now as in Bedrock. For deploying all sorts of models, right, in ways which are serverless and so on, right? So very, very efficient in use. So.
Right, good question in the chat here. So let me just see if I can bring that up. But Swift Jagger asks, this is a really, really broad question, but there's so many SIM systems, there's so many security information event management systems, or EDR, endpoint detection and response systems. So why are we choosing a specific system like SentinelOne matter if it all comes down to the human actually have to pass through all of that data?
Super question, right? And as a platform owner, you're kind of paranoid about, right, or is the age of platforms over? But let me put it to you this way, right? Is that it sure makes it easier if you know the properties of the system that your agent's going to be using, right? And you know that both the facilities and the performance characteristics and so on. So one of the things about the platform that we built, we bought Zscaler and a couple of other bits, right, to put it together. Otherwise, we would have had to, build it from scratch. Is, we can take normal queries, right, over fairly large parts of time and run them in, say, 30 seconds. Now that allows for a conversational cadence, right, in assistance, right, which is what's needed for people to actually reason through, security problems, right? I mean, if you have a legacy store or you have a differently arranged store, those queries might take 45 minutes. That's definitely not conversational, right? If you want to take action, right, you could ask the LLM or the agent, right, to build from scratch API calls, maybe via MCP, right, for a vast array of things. Of course, you could do that, right? But it's more error prone than calling your own hyper automation gateway, right, where you've got a bunch of stuff already set up and so on, and you can rely on it. So it does matter. However, what we don't expect, right, as platform vendors, that this is the one true store, right? We were mentioning Sauron before we came on here, right? We're not trying to build the one ring, right, to rule them all. We know that there's 7 rings. People are going to have a variety of security tooling forever, right? And I think what we're trying to be is this, and I think with AWS's partnership and so on, is a really good part, right, of that ecosystem, where you can get more work done, right? So I would say it does matter which platform, right? It matters a little less, right, going forward. But I think the idea is, that eventually we'll all end up in the same place, but it doesn't mean that we all have it now, right?
Yeah, being able to speak the same language, Elvish, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. Jess will be giggling in the background, I'm sure. So yeah, if you're able to speak the same language, then you can start to collaborate more with your different tools. So you're not doing that, pull down from one tool, pass it, normalize it, upload into another tool. That's a really, really bad way of trying to manage, particularly a security incident when you're under pressure with lots of data. And so if you have a normalized format like OCSF, that makes it super easy to do that. But then you're also layering models on top of that can further democratize, I guess, access to that. So I might not know what the data storage service is called across all of my environments. But actually, if you put it into a model like Purple, for example, it can normalize that data for you, so you can kind of understand. I don't need to know all of the different terminology for all of the different areas. I can get a view on where my data is.
Yeah, what we trust is that customers have expertise and they want to be able to use that expertise, right? Security expertise. They don't want to have to learn 50 different systems, right? To be able to apply that expertise. And I think that's the role that we have as vendors right across the spectrum, right? Whether it's, any of us, right? Is that what we're trying to do is to allow people to focus on security intent here, right?
100%. And Gregor, you mentioned, I think one of the things, which is the common language, with now the agentic form, there's also this model context protocol like MCPs that are coming in. And I think one of the things now we get from customers asked constantly is that, look, this is great. I did say model context protocol.
I know. Acronym alert.
Our production key team is keeping us very much on our toes, guys. Just so we're clear on acronyms.
So I think what customers are asking is that now we have this another common language protocol, MCPs and MCP servers everywhere. How do we ensure that the security aspect of that is as we move into delivering security outcomes in this agentic form? What about the threat vectors and the threat criteria? I think there's already been talk about MCP servers getting compromised and or having vulnerabilities. So as a security partner and security provider, where and how do you balance that?
I love the joke that was in a blog post recently, right? The S in MCP stands for security. You're like, yeah, okay, hang on a second. There's no S, right? Look, MCP, just for viewers, right, is essentially a protocol it's like fuzzy APIs, right, with a blackboard, right, so that you can interact with services without necessarily knowing all of their detailed capabilities, and you can share information from these different services with an agent, right? Slightly different from A2A, agent to agent protocol, which are now essentially more encapsulation, right? A bit more like inter-process communication between sandboxes, right? That kind of thing. So these emerging standards, right? I think they've been adopted very rapidly, right? So Anthropic announces MCP, and then OpenAI says, yeah, we're doing it too, and then everybody else has kind of followed suit. They're not incredibly well engineered. There's a lot of critique about use of transport protocols and various things, right? For MCP in particular. So they still have a ways to go. But what you said is true, right? They become surfaces, right? And whether it was however secure you make these agent-to-agent communications, right, they're still very rich, right? And that allows for a lot of tampering, right, and manipulation, right, that you wouldn't have in more rigid protocols, let's say, right? So there's two main things there. There's the kind of immaturity of these protocols, and then there's the, even in their final state, right, the richness of this messaging, right, it allows for an awful lot more tampering, let's say, right?
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a follow-up question from Swift Jaguar in the chat. We can bring it up. I think the question is, so will these systems be able to query with just human language instead of SQL, like find me where a random user ran Nmap?
This is one of the beauty parts of this era, right? Is that, like I said just before, our customers have security expertise. They understand, right, the ways that people can compromise systems, and but they don't always understand, how to get the information to like test that hypothesis or show that something happened, right? So with Purple, for maybe two years now, right, we've been able to translate requests like the one that this question just included, right, find me where a random user ran Nmap, right, and turn that into a query over a number of different systems and a number of different data stores underneath. That part is done. The amazing thing about this reasoning stuff that's going on right now is that now you can take sequences of these kind of complex under the hood actions and render them, in a way that the human can follow, right? So first, I'm trying to do this. So I'm going to do this first, and then this, and then this, and then this. And each one has a description. First, I'm trying to find which users are in the group. And then I'm trying to, these are human level descriptions. And underneath, there'll be a query for a subsystem, if you like, either Power Query, or it might be for Security Lake, or and so on, right? And so the user can kind of follow along now. And they put into what we call notebooks, but lots of people call them chats, right? Notebooks, which then can be shared, right? So one of the more important things is how do humans adjoin, as we said before, how do they get into the work that these systems are doing, right? So one other mechanism that we're working on is like, how do I ask for attention, right? And how do I cue the person to the attention needed without making them read through the entire trace of the work I've done, which could be, essentially hours of work for a person, right? So there's two pieces here. One is, how do I decide when to ask for attention? And the second piece is, how do I quickly clue a person into what's needed, right? These are major challenges, right? But the part that, our viewer asked, that's already available, right, in the products that we ship.
Very cool.
Awesome. That was going to be my next question was, when is that available? So yeah, that's awesome.
So all of the stuff that we talked about there, the piece that's still being worked on, right, is that the reasoning piece that we showed at RSA, and I think our little purple QR code popped up a couple times, right? If you want to go there and take a look at, you can see the source intelligence piece, you can see the reasoning piece, and you can see the remediation actions, right, where you can say, yes, I would like you to do that lean in pattern that we talked about earlier.
Awesome. And Gregor, we got Reinforce coming up, and that's our global security, AWS security event, which is in one of my favorite cities, Philadelphia. Are you going to be there?
Yes, I'll be there.
Awesome. And so if you're coming, we'd love to see you. We'll be broadcasting live from the show floor as well. So it'll be awesome to see all of our viewers there. So if you haven't got a ticket, come on, guys, get down to the event. You can have a chat with SentinelOne as well as AWS and our other partners.
Yeah, Gregor,
Awesome.
and a lot of machine learning talk. I think just to close out on a candid note. So what is Gregor busy doing outside of machine learning and AI? What was the last maybe like music concert that you went to?
The last music concert I went to was in the Barbican, probably about 10 years ago, and it was Steve Wright, and he was on the mixing desk, and I think it was music for 18 musicians or something like that, right? That's
awesome. Love it.
That's very cool.
Awesome. Gregor, it's been awesome having you. Thank you everyone for joining us. Don't go away. We're coming back with James Tucker from Zscaler. Gregor, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
Great
Rob.
to speak with you. Hey, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe good day, everyone. Welcome back to AWS Security Live. We're a live streaming show. We are actually live. Send us comments, questions in the chat. Talking about security challenges, and with a huge group of amazing partners to come on the show and talk to us about how they're helping customers to solve those challenges. We stream every Tuesday or every other Tuesday. 8 to 9 a.m. PST, which is 4 to 5 GMT. And if you're across the channel, our continental friends, then that's 4 to 5 CT. So it's great to have you with us. My name's Rob Hale. I lead our security partner business in EMEA and try and glue together all the different areas of our security partner business with native tools to solve customer security challenges. And I'm joined by the amazing Himanshu. So Himanshu, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm actually joining live from Seattle from our partner equip that's going on live here starting today. My name is Himanshu. I lead the team of our security, identity, and governance worldwide specialists. We help partners and customers with their security outcomes using AWS native security services and or partner tools. Really exciting time, for security partners. It's been a busy few days or weeks, coming off of the RSA conference. We have partner equip going on in Americas. We'll be moving towards reinforce in just a few weeks here, and then looking forward to the partner equip in EMEA. So
awesome.
Thanks for having me here.
Tell us a bit about Partner Equip before we welcome our guest on, because that's something that we're really leaning in with, and our partners are leaning in with as well. So what is Partner Equip?
Yeah, one of the things we've been striving for, is helping both partners as well as customers stay up to date on all things new AWS. As you know, there's continuous stream of innovation that's happening, and then one of the things that we consistently hear from both partners and customers is they want to hear more from us, more often, more frequently. And then want to know what are all the things that are coming out, what are all the innovations that are helping them, and then share those examples with all the other partners. So Partner Equip is essentially a technical enablement and learning experience for both business personas at partners as well as builder or technical personas. And it's broken up into multiple tracks and specializations. So partners who might be, specialized in managed security service providers, MSSPs, for instance, or who must be specialized in generative AI or Gen AI and AI ML. So there are various different tracks you can choose, and depending upon your specialty, you can come join these partner equips. And there are tons and tons of sessions on enabling partners with that content, all things new AWS. You also get to hear and see a sneak peek into what's in the future. And then there's also one-to-one meetings that can happen between, AWS leaders as well as both from the service teams, our partner teams, program updates, etc. So there's a lot of content that gets provided for partner enablement.
Awesome. It's a busy 4-day event. So if you're an AWS competency partner, talk to AWS. Make sure your technical teams, your business teams are signed into to Partner Equip. We're running them around the world. There's 3 different locations. So make sure you're on that. But we've got an amazing partner on today. So we have James Tucker from Zscaler. Let's give James a big welcome.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on.
Hey James, nice to see you again.
It's good to be seen, Rob. We haven't worked together in a few years, so I'm really thrilled to be here talking to you guys today.
Awesome, great to have you. So, obviously working with Zscaler. I never know, by the way, as a European and as a Brit, should it be Zscaler? Should it be Zscaler?
I'll tell you what, Rob. You can call it Zscaler if I can call that river that runs through London the Thames. Okay? Agree to that. All right? You get if the trade is worthwhile to you, then we can make that agreement. No problem.
That's a fair trade. I'll stick with Zscaler and Thames. That's fine. So tell us about what you do at Zscaler.
Yeah, so I've been at Zscaler for almost 6 years now. And today I'm the head of our CISO and residence team. So covering all of EMEA, have a team of CISOs and, out there doing a little bit of what Himanshu does, a little bit of podcasts, answering an unfortunate amount of security questionnaires and due diligence questions. And really the same thing like Himanshu said, what gets me up and gets me out is talking to customers and helping them drive those outcomes that I know they can do.
Awesome.
Very
awesome.
cool.
How did you get into security? It's sometimes an interesting story about how people got into security. So do you have a story to tell?
Yes. So I went to school for theater. Okay. Then I realized kind of waiting tables really sucked, and decided to change into information systems and just IT support stuff. But then I found I'm old enough, and I'm old enough to remember a piece of software called LimeWire back in the day. And I found a disk full of things, and I installed some software. And then about a week later, I got a DMCA letter saying, "You've been a very naughty boy." And I absolutely panicked. I formatted my Windows machine, installed Red Hat, sent them a letter back and said, I don't know what you're talking about. I run Linux. And that was one of the times where there's these periods that I think make computing fun again, right? The first time you touched a Mac, the first time you had a CD-ROM and you watched the elephant on the screen about this big, right? And then figuring out Linux. And that led me towards SourceFire and Snort. And that's just sort of kept going from there.
Great story. I love that.
It's a very difficult story, I know.
Yeah, I think James might have used some terms there that a lot of our listeners probably might have to Google and figure out. Especially SourceFire and Snort. Like this is going
Snort
back
rules. I remember Snort rules.
I still write them in my sleep, boys.
Very, very cool. Although James, I think you mentioned something really important, which is old is new again, and in the security industry, I think there's this cyclic circle that goes around, and I felt personally that a lot of the information that comes out sort of overpowers the narrative from a few months ago. We were all talking about zero trust, this concept, this framework that was helping customers, contextualize, correlate, add some information to identity so that, it was essentially the ability to not trust anything and then, elevate or prompt for more authentication on the go each time, every time. And Zscaler was at the forefront of that. And now I think we're in this AI, artificial intelligence / generative AI landscape, which has evolved over, very quickly over the last, 12 or 18 months. Do we see a convergence here of these two in the future? And how is Zscaler helping customers with these two concepts in general?
So when it comes to zero trust, right? I am well aware that the marketing folks have taken over, and it's starting to have no meaning at this point. I think I heard in Australia they call it a modern defensible architecture, which I'm quite fond of. Yes, I mean I made that up myself. I didn't steal it from anywhere. They're all sleeping when we're filming this, so it should be fine. But when we look at what, at least how we at Zscaler think about it, right? I don't care where your users are or what device they're using. They can be using their phone, they could be using an iPad, they could be in the office, outside the office, on an airplane. I have customers, we have a 5G offering. So it could be over 5G, Starlink, you name it. I don't really care about the plumbing. And then it's going to go to some destination. So the core fundamental value that we add is we sit in the middle there. And if you make us kind of the default route in and out to the internet, then we're able to apply, hey, is this Rob? Cool. Is Rob allowed to access, AWS's financial records that haven't been disclosed yet? No, we're probably going to stop him. Is Rob doing this from some sort of, Uzbekistan or someplace that he usually doesn't access from? And then apply those controls there. So once you have zero trust implemented in that way, right? That kind of, I was thinking about it the other day. We used to talk a lot about defense in depth. And I think now what we really need is ubiquitous defense, because there's so many, there's no perimeter. It's chaos and pandemonium, cats and dogs living together, right? But once you've done that and you have that point of visibility and that policy enforcement point, then we can answer questions like, hey, how are my users accessing various AI things? What types are they using? What are they asking those? And of course, we wouldn't be a security vendor if we didn't have a lot of work that we're putting in AI. Although I will say the AI Act has made the fact that a lot of marketing that called machine learning, sorry, I can't say AI. I have to say artificial intelligence. I am going to trigger the lunk alarm, I promise. But once we've got everything going there and we can view and access and assess, then we can make intelligent decisions about how and what our users are going to do and how we can enable all of those things.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Actually, if you're viewing, if you've got a question for either myself, Himanshu, or James, put a message in chat. We are live, so we've got a few in there at the moment, actually. So Himanshu, you have one of our viewers' dream jobs. So there's some competition there. Maybe a hiring opportunity for you. So that's awesome. But a question from the chat is, we have a viewer who's they're senior in college. They want to get into cloud security. What are the top things that they should be actually mastering? And do they want to focus on tech experience or go for certifications? What are your views on that?
Is that to me or Himanshu?
Both of you, yeah, great. Let's get some views.
So I'd say that tech basics, right? And tech basics now are not basic for us who've been in this for a while, right? Things like Kubernetes, Docker, all of that kind of virtualization tech is key. I think understanding traffic flows, but maybe this is just the CISO in me speaking. I think understanding frameworks and how security is actually not just put together, right? Everybody can make a firewall rule. Everybody else can find a way around it, but understanding how you validate that, are you using a known security framework? And that governance part will help you a lot in the technical application, depending on which route you want to go.
Awesome. Great answer. Himanshu, have you got any views?
Yeah, no, I was actually going to joke. I was like, hey, start learning how to write snort rules. I mean, that'll put you in the right track. But I think on a serious note, yes, I mean, certifications are a good way. I think I would care with caution because like James said, I mean, a lot of the stuff is getting abstracted these days. I remember, assembly and C used to be the foundational of a lot of the code that was written. But now it's becoming very abstracted and easier to dive into, but it's always good to go back to the basics and ground yourself in reality, and that applies true for concepts and frameworks. When it comes to zero trust, stay away from the buzzword marketing lingo. Dive into the details. I remember, I think for me it was the OSI or the network layers of Tenenbaum that really grounded me in okay, what are the different layers and how packets traverse from point A to point B. I would say, yeah, I mean, dive into cloud certifications, but again, go back to the basics.
What's the mnemonic you used for remembering the 7 layers?
Oh, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
I indelibly etched into my brain. Please do not take salespeople's advice.
That's awesome. I love that. I think the main thing that I see is you can't secure something until you understand how it should be used or how it can be used. You need to understand how things work. And that's, I think, particularly when you're talking about cloud security, a lot of people approach it by saying, I know about security, I don't need to know how the cloud works. And that's one of the main things that actually we need to make sure. It's actually easier to teach people who are already in a domain about security than it is to teach somebody in security about all the different environments. So learn how the cloud works, learn how to do operations in the cloud, how it should be working, and then how you can actually use security to help accelerate that, rather than writing lots of security rules and being no people. Find out how you can actually help an organization with security. I think that's a really undervalued, an under index skill in security these days, is making sure you're business relevant by helping the business with security.
I also think that that my advice to Swift Jaguar would be also, you're a senior in college, but you're not done learning yet. All right, like every year I make a list of things I want to learn, things I want to be able to understand. And if we look at, like you mentioned it, like 3 years ago, the stuff I can do with AI was the science fiction stuff, right? And now I use AI almost every day for something. So technology changes really fast, and you don't want to be the last fax machine repairman on the planet. You gotta keep changing.
Yeah. And I say, if you're a senior at college, you're a digital native. All of our hosts on the call, myself included, we're not digital native, so you've got to step up on a lot of these to us. So keep on learning, and get ahead of the curve. So talk to us about. I'm going to say it. I know it's kind of a dirty word, but compliance and regulation and stuff. So how are you seeing customers kind of trying to deal with the huge amount of regulation around, just in Europe, we have NIS2, we have DORA, we have Cyber Resiliency Acts, and there's a number of other things in the US and elsewhere as well. So how are you seeing customers try and cope with that and try and still remain secure but functional?
Well, they start by sending me a 300-line questionnaire. No, it's a lot about governance, right? And I do think a zero trust architecture it doesn't solve the problem, but it makes proving it and solving it much easier, right? If you have a ancient architecture, everything's put together, trying to prove compliance is impossible. So I see a lot of customers working to refresh and simplify their environments, because the more variables you have, the harder it is to prove. I see a lot of, NIS2 and DORA will separate those out, right? Because those are fundamentally designed to make sure we have herd immunity for all of Europe within NIS2, like must be this cyber secure to enter. And then DORA is also taking care of people who move money. But effectively, these two things are trying to increase the baseline difficulty. And that's great. And I think if I think about how compliance used to be, right? Like, I don't know, let's take PCI compliance, right? I was selling IPSs back then. I loved it because it said, thou shalt have IPS. Cool. They check it, put it on the shelf. Do we have one?
Compliance.
It's sitting right there. And these ones, because of this generation, because of the teeth that they have, because of the way that they're being implemented, are actually moving towards meaningful compliance and not just check this box, right? The outcome is clear. So I think a lot of the customers that I work with are leaning into them quite heavily. And it's raised a lot of questions about resilience, both cyber and architectural resilience. And I think that a lot of people are making a lot of progress in terms of being more stable and more secure as a result of these things.
Yeah, we've mentioned some really big areas here. So we've mentioned a lot of things around compliance, around NIS2 and DORA, etc. And they're not small, remitted bits of legislation. So, but neither is zero trust. I have spoken to customers before and said we're going to implement zero trust, and it's like, well, hang on a sec. That may not be as admirable as a goal, but that's a huge undertaking. So how can customers make that easier? How can they make progress towards that goal in a way that the business will support and that can help them get support from the business?
So the first thing I'll say is that if you have a zero trust project, you're going to have a bad time. All right. Zero trust isn't a project, right? It's like, having a baby. You make the baby, and then there's a whole 18 to 30 years, depending on how codependent you are, that happens after baby is made. And zero trust is very much like that. So what I tell people is that it needs to be a philosophy. It needs to be understood in that everything kind of comes to this North Star and everything else is an exception. I also see people who go look at the CISA. CISA, give me the alarm. So they look at that image of the temple with the 5 pillars, and they say, "Great, we have 5 pillars. So we'll start with pillar 1, identity, and then pillar 2, and then they run out of money somewhere in the middle of pillar 2 or 3." Because it was treated as a project, and 2, it's not it's the pillar by pillar trap. So it needs to be something that isn't just for security, because if I'm being honest, if there weren't people attacking, if we didn't have to, nobody would buy security, right? Nobody would. We'd buy iPhones and boats and fun cars and stuff instead, right? But when it comes to zero trust, you have to be able to, as you're talking to the people in your organization, you have to tie it back to, and also we'll be able to onboard a new merger and acquisitions, a new acquisition in 2 weeks instead of a year. We'll be able to, I have a CISO that I talked to who said, look, what I have now is if the rent is 10,000 pounds cheaper across the street, literally I can just have everybody lift their laptops, turn left, walk across the street, and there's no business interruption.
Yeah. We
see
that a lot.
Yeah. And like you said, James, I think fundamentally, I remember being in the identity and access management space in the past, and enterprise authentication space. There was a concept called adaptive authentication or risk-based authentication, which sort of was the glue of, it all started with identity compromise, like you said, otherwise we'll be all, doing other fun things. But since a lot of the threat vectors originated from identity compromise, this concept evolved. But then cloud and SaaS applications sort of created more complexity, because now we were not just talking about humans as an identity. There was all these different forms of identities that were coming into the picture, which was devices, and now with generative AI, and I think the conversation we were having with Gregor on our previous meeting was all about machine identities and what role agents or these agentic AI agents will play. So to me, I think it's becoming more and more prevalent on, tying an identity to every entity, whether it's humans, whether it's devices, whether it's machines, whether it's, even, like you said, virtualized containers, images, etc. So that it's all about the good old basic concepts of authorization, authentication, and auditability done in a way that you can ground yourself in proving who you are, where you are, and then also elevating the need of multi-factor authentication or other means to prove where that request is coming from.
Absolutely. I mean, I think something that I kind of took out of the middle part there is that identity isn't just Himanshu, James, and Rob, right? It could be an IoT device. It could be a workload in AWS. But being able to say, this is the initiator of this traffic, and be able to say, yeah, this is this. And it's not an IP address, right? Because I counted, I go through 60 plus IP addresses a day, right? As I travel. So it's IP addresses are sort of functionally useless as a security indicator, tertiary at best. But being able to say, yeah, I know who or what this is, it's allowed to go there. And if there's any doubt, being able to implement some sort of security controls, being able to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be downloading 36 gigs of corporate data at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? All that.
Exactly. Yeah.
All of that. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I think you touched on some really interesting areas there, and one of which was around, people accessing, applications, services, could be cloud service, could be SaaS services from wherever they are, from wherever device they are, but with a consistent security policy. So it's not just about security, it's around resilience as well, around, what happens if you need to work across the street, or you need to work in, another country, or, you need access to data. And that's where you need that kind of security as an enabler to make sure that people can do their jobs, but you have that resilience as well.
Look, the biggest advantage of the cloud, whether it's moving our workloads to AWS, moving our security to Zscaler, is that they're global services, right? If a data center gets sick, or backhoe Bob comes and kills a fiber cable, right? We as providers have spent a lot of time and considerable effort to engineer around that to make it ubiquitous as possible. And that's the true benefit, I think.
So if there's one thing you want customers to do, or viewers to do kind of right now, what would your top tip be to get started on this journey?
So in a zero trust journey, I think the first thing that you need to do is understand how much zero trust is success in your organization, right? The marketing says everything's 100% zero trust. It's perfect. But there's the AIX in the basement. All right. It's called AIX. Don't give me the banner. And, you have these things that need to be ring fenced off. And so some organizations, it's 20%. We just need to protect our users. Other organizations, it's 99% because they're highly regulated and there's those edge cases. But that's where I would start. And then second part to that is figuring out what doing that will benefit your company. How can you make more money, be faster, be more flexible? And awesome. We're at time, so I'm going to stop yammering.
Awesome. If you want to find out more, there's a QR code in the corner. Have a look, download Zscaler's resilience report. James, it's been awesome having you. We're next going to be coming at you remotely again from another session, and then we will come at you live from AWS Reinforce. Sorry. So it's been awesome having you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.